Hi, everyone. This is Laura Weiss, Program Director at the Maryland State Arts Council, and I'm joined by my co-program director, Emily Sollenberger. And today we're going to go through the FY27 Grants for Organizations Financial Table and Financial Statements. This is a really important part of the GFO application, so we just want to walk through a couple things and also share a couple of helpful pointers and tips to help us in this process. So what we're going to go through, first we're just going to talk about the requirements of the financial statement that are part of the application. And then we're going to go through the financial table itself and talk about what we're looking for and also exactly how to input the financials so that the financial table exactly reflects your financial statement. So to begin with, the financial statements, everyone who's submitting a GFO application, you're going to need to include a financial statement as part of that application. The financials should reflect your last completed fiscal year. So if your organization operates on a calendar year, we're going to be looking for calendar year 2024 as part of that. So since we're still in calendar year 2025, we'd be looking for calendar year 2024. If your organization operates on a traditional fiscal year, then we're looking for FY25. These should be finalized documents. So that means that when you're submitting them, they do need to be signed or authorized by your fiscal staff, a board member, such as your treasurer, something like that, somebody who can sign off on that to say that these are finalized documents. Something important to note is if you are an arts program, you will need to provide the audited financial statements for the full organization, but you're going to complete the table and provide an additional arts program statement that reflects only your arts-based income and expenses. So in that case, your financial table, it's only looking at that arts-based, the arts-based income and expenses. We don't want to see the table for the full college or university or something along those lines. So make sure you're really clear about that. And if you have questions, make sure you check in with one of us about that. So a couple of things about the type of financial statement and what you would be required to submit. So if your total allowable income is under $750,000, what we're looking for from your organization, again, this would be from the most recently completed fiscal or calendar year, we're looking for a financial statement that is signed by a professional accountant or the organization's fiscal officer. What we mean by a financial statement is typically that's going to be a profit and loss statement, a P&L. What we're looking for, we need to see the income and the expenses. Something important to point out is that a Form 990 is not going to work in this case. It doesn't quite have the information that we're looking for. So make sure we're looking for that profit and loss statement so we can see that. And then we want to make sure that it is signed by somebody who is authorized within your organization, and then that must be included with your application. If you're a larger organization that's over $750,000 in total allowable income, what we need from you would be an independent external audit prepared by a CPA firm for that most recently completed year. Again, that would need to be finalized. It would need to be board approved so that everything is done when you're submitting it. We know that sometimes audits take a long time, so there is a little bit of a grace period for audits. If you're in the middle of your audit right now and it's not finalized by the November 15th deadline, please reach out to your program director before the deadline to discuss sending the updated audit by March 1st of 2026. So you have that kind of extension period from the application deadline all the way until March 1st. We do need to receive everything by March 1st. We'll provide instructions on what you should include with the application as a placeholder. We do need some information still, but we'll be able to provide an opportunity for you to update that between the deadline and March 1st. So be in touch with us if you fall into that category. So the financial table itself, this is a big part of the application. In that financial table, you're going to be entering the income and the expenses for your arts organization or arts program's most recently completed fiscal year. And the goal of it is that the table should match the financial statement or the audit. We ask that within the table you include really clear notes or instructions so we can connect the various lines of the table to the information that is provided in the financial statement or the audit. And we're going to walk through that in a couple of slides, give a couple of examples of what would be helpful for us. But just know we're trying to really connect those dots between the financial statement and the financial table. So any notes you can provide for us is really helpful. When you're looking in the application itself, the financial table is going to appear as a button that kind of pops up into another window. So that's going to be in the financial information section of the application. There's a blue financials button with a little $sign on it. That's what you're going to click. That's going to open up the financial table itself. And once you get there, it looks something like this. There's going to be different sections, and Emily's going to go through those different sections in just a moment here. But what you're going to need to do is within each of those sections, allowable earned income, for example, is shown here on the screen. You're going to need to click the little plus button. There's an arrow pointing to that plus button on the screen here. That's going to add a line, and from that line, you would select from the drop down the type that you're adding. So you might add, for example, there's tuition shown here on the screen. There's memberships. There's different types of categories that you're going to select and then add the corresponding amount and any notes about that. If you don't have a particular category, say you don't have tuition for your organization, then you just don't select that. You don't have to include that within your financial table. One thing to be just cautious of is that you can only include a specific line once. So you can't have tuition appear at the top of your allowable earned income and then several lines later choose tuition again. The system's going to see that as a duplicate and it's not going to let you submit that. So just be really careful, make sure that you're not selecting the same thing multiple times, or else you're going to have issues with submitting the application at the end. So to just really understand what the financial table is and what we do with that, like I said, everything has to match between the financial table and the corresponding financial statement. The financial statement is used to verify the numbers in the table. What Emily and I have to do when we go through all of the different applications is we need to account for every single numerical figure in that table, meaning that we need to locate everything that's in the table. We have to find it in the attached statement. So everything has to align and we have to know what goes with what. This is really important because this is how we verify the total allowable income figure, which is a really important part of the funding formula, which we'll talk about in just a couple of slides. But we really want that number to be the exact right number because it will have impact on your grant amount. So we really take our time. We go through every single line, every single table, every single statement to make sure that everything is in alignment. So the more notes that you can share with us on how you're aligning the statement to the table, the better. We do often have to reach out to applicants just to clarify things, or if we're having trouble figuring out where something is, we will reach out to you so that way we can make sure that we find out that information. But it's great just upfront if we can get those notes and get that information so we have a really clear understanding of everything. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily here to talk about the various categories that are going to be in that financial table.
Great, thanks, Laura. And I'll also add, with the different categories that we're going to go through here, externally from the State Arts Council's office, we are asked for data collection for different reports and different other state agencies. So there are very specific types of income and types of expenses we're asking for, because there's other purposes involved too. So just want to add that on here, in addition to all the needs that we have here at the State Arts Council. But the first category of 3 different income sections within the financial table is the allowable earned revenue section. So you'll see all the categories to the right-hand side of your screen. You know, that includes things like admissions and ticket sales, tuition from programming, if you are selling concessions, those sorts of things would be earned revenue sources. If you are used to applying for the GFO application, you'll note that there's been a couple of shifts this year. We've got some combined types. So for example, the sale of goods is now including merchandise within that section. So just note the different types. And again, as Laura mentioned earlier, not all categories need to be used, but just select what is applicable to you and your organization. The next one here is the allowable contributed revenue sources. So again, this is the second of 3 income sections for the financial table. Again, not all categories need to be used, so just select what is applicable to you. And you'll see on the right-hand side of this particular slide, the different types. And there's also been some shifts for the FY27 application as well. So you will no longer see board and trustees as a separate line, but you would include those donations within individual donations, for example. We've also pulled out the MSAC funding, so any previous grants for organization funding, or perhaps any additional funding you receive from other programs from MSAC, you would pull that out separately so we can see that. And then any other state funding from, say, other agencies that you might receive can go in the other state government line. There's also a note here around the restricted income. There's actually 2 options if you have restricted income. So this would be showing the release of your restricted income to be used for that particular year. So you could either indicate that in, say you've got a big foundation award and it was restricted to a particular time and it was released from restriction. You could pull that information into the foundation line itself, or if it's easier for you to align with your financial statement, to just have the full amount be pulled into that bolded category, allowable income released from restriction. You can put it there. So there's 2 options if you are an organization that deals with restricted income. Just want to make sure you're not double counting the income twice. So if you have any questions about how and where to put that restricted income that's released from restriction, just be in touch with us and we can work through that together. The third category for income is actually the non-allowable contributed income sources. So again, not all the categories might be applicable to you. So just the ones that might show up for you, we want to make sure you're including in the non-allowable section. If you perhaps still, you might be on a calendar year and you might have your arts relief funding from the State Arts Council still within your financial statement, just remember to keep that in the non-allowable section. It's just not allowable for our purposes for GFO. Most of you should not have that anymore in your most recently completed fiscal year, but if you do, just make sure you're pulling that out separately. Additionally, if you receive any special request, that's considered non-allowable as well. And there's a couple of categories we'll go over. We'll also note that, again, going back to restricted income, if you do have restricted income that is restricted by time and not necessarily program or purpose, unless of course it's capital or another non-allowable reason, if it's restricted income by time and it is currently restricted within your financial statement for the year, that would be non-allowable. So it's only allowable when it's released from that restriction and used for your operations. So just a couple of notes there. Another note, and this is really just for our arts programs, and it's in a particular group of arts programs that have what we call parent support. There's a fairly new definition with parent support. It's on the website, it's in the guidelines, but it's also here as well for your reference, that if you have parent support, that is considered non-allowable for our purposes of determining your grants for organizations funding. So this is a very kind of formalized statement here. I'm not going to read it out loud, but this would be for folks, in particular, our colleges and universities that fall within a larger institution that might be getting support from that institution to support your arts program. Or perhaps a larger organization that might have a chapter of that particular organization here in Maryland, and you might have funding that comes directly from that parent organization. That funding from the parent organization would be considered non-allowable to determine the grants for organizations. So again, this is something to note in particular for our arts programs. So if you're an arts organization, this is not applicable to you. Just want to uplift this as you're completing the financial table. So for the non-allowable contributed sources, you'll see all the different types here. Probably the most common that we're seeing might be revenue raised for an endowment. If there's revenue that's raised for capital purposes, and this would also include if you received an arts capital grant from the State Arts Council. A lot of times we see non-allowable unrealized gains from investments here. In kind is probably the most common for our small organizations all the way up to our largest organizations. In kind income and expenses would be considered non-allowable. There's also those particular notes we uplifted around the arts relief, special request. If you receive a state legislative budget line item from in the current fiscal year, those sorts of things are all considered non-allowable. All right, now moving into expenses, there have not been, I believe, any changes from the previous years. So these are really your common expenses that for your operations. So again, these are your salaries and benefits, any expenses having to do with productions and exhibitions costs, moving into any kind of advertising and marketing, development expenses, accounting fees, rent, mortgage, utilities. Any of your operating would be an allowable expense for GFO. And then there's just a few non-allowable expenses here that we have. And again, this would be considered any capital expenses that you'd be utilizing in the current fiscal year. Again, those in-kind expenses that would also be reflected on the income side. Any grant making, so that kind of idea of pass-through funds from us to, say, somebody else, the grant making would be non-allowable use of funds. And depreciation. We'll also note that this year we did add a line that is for other non-allowable expenses, and we asked that you describe that. So if there's something that's coming up in your financial statement and you really can't find a place for it, most likely it'll be an other non-allowable expense, but if you're not sure, just reach out to Laura or myself and we can help find that best place for a particular expense. Okay, and just a couple examples that we've pulled here from some previous grantees that we thought worked really well. And Laura mentioned this earlier, when you're providing your financial statement, that would be in the form of an attachment. And then we are looking at that attached financial statement with the table and then kind of cross-referencing to verify the numbers. So this is an example of income from an organization, and they basically numbered the lines for each of their income lines. And so you can kind of see that, tuition is 1, gallery sales is 2, and then the corresponding numbers there. So that helps us when they pull it into the financial table, that you can see those numbers listed in that third column there, that the tuition, is a total of $28,025.20. but that is the total coming from the lines 1, 3, and 4 from that financial statement. So you can see how that corresponds really nicely for us to make that math work and see the direct correspondence between, yes, indeed, that is an allowable earned income source, and that makes sense on their financial table. So really easy to make those connections. The next example here is more in the form of an audit that might be coming from a larger organization. So a similar idea here. So the group decided to letter their different revenue sources that you'll see included on the left-hand side in that example. And then that translates to the notes within the financial table. So you can kind of see this here. The difference between the first example and this example is you can actually see, rather than combining the different lines, they've actually split up their lines in the financial table. So if you look on the right-hand column, you can see that there's multiple B's. So they split that income line in their audit into tuition and concessions. And then similar for C, I think there's 1, 2, 3 different lines that they split up between venue rental, parking revenue, and other earned revenue source. So that actually makes sense, since those are earned revenue sources for this particular organization, and had really good notes here around, what the parking revenue is directly connected to. So again, that's kind of some examples that are really helpful for us, so that we can see, okay, this line item is combined on the financial table, or this line item is split among multiple sections within the financial table. So like Laura said earlier, the more notes and the more directives that we have, the easier it's going to be for us to verify your allowable income number, and the less questions that we'll have for you. All right, so I'm actually going to hand it back over to Laura to wrap us up here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emily. And I think we've hit on these a couple of times, but just to kind of wrap up in summary here. So like Emily just said, in the financial table, including those descriptive notes about the name of the line or the page number of the audit, and where we can find that information. That's all extremely helpful for us, so that way we can just really understand how one thing is correlating to the other. If a number represents partial amounts of a larger total, or is made up of multiple lines or multiple amounts in the financial statement, including notes about that breakdown, that's extremely helpful too. So you might write something like, this represents $5,000 of the $10,000 contributions line that can be seen on page 4. It just makes it so that we understand this is being broken out into different things. If you're dealing with an audit, if there's any kind of corresponding note within the audit that relates to the described line, that's also really helpful to have that information in the notes. So you might say something like, see note 9 on page 17. That just, again, it gives us a little bit of a roadmap to understand how all of this is coming together. And it also, audits are very long, very dense documents. So it can help to just point us in the right direction, so we know where to find that. So like we said at the bottom here, we like notes in the table. Please use as many, add as many as you can. And then use the template as a guide before dropping in the numbers in the application table. There is a template that is available on the website. It is a template, it mirrors the financial table itself. So it's just an Excel spreadsheet version. So you can grab that to kind of work through everything, if that's helpful for you and your organization, before you then transfer it into the actual financial table in Smart Simple. And then just a quick note here, just to mention the funding formula, because all of this work to determine your total allowable income, again, that's really that's a very important part of the funding formula. So for GFO, the formula that we use, it takes that total allowable income, It's multiplied. We're in the process of really changing this. We're phasing out the panel score percentage. So some of you will have panel scores still, some of you will not, depending on your previous score. If you don't know exactly what that means, make sure you reference our other videos about the revision process to really understand what that means. But if you have that variable, there's also the panel score, and also then multiplied by the cap allocation percentage, which is essentially the percentage cut of our budget that is being factored into the funding itself. Those three variables, they are multiplied together to get you your grant award amount. So it's really, really important that we have that exact total allowable income number. We want to make sure it's accurate. We want to make sure that it's fully reflective of your organization. So that's why it's really important to have all of these notes and the guidance from you. And this is just a final reminder here that all FY27 GFO applications are due on November 15th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. in Smart Simple. Just a reminder, we no longer have on and off year applications. That means everything is due on November the 15th this year. And again, if you have questions about that, or if you don't know about the revision process, make sure you reference the emails that you've either received from myself or from Emily, which really outline the new process. There are also several videos available on our website. We highly encourage you to watch those so you understand the new process. But if you have any questions at all, we are certainly here to help you. Both of our email addresses are here on the screen, and you've likely received emails from us before. So please reach out if you have any questions, and we are more than happy to help. And we thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you found this helpful, and we will see your applications on November 15th. Thanks so much.